Okay, so just to repeat, you have your assessment coming up. You should have gotten an email about that. Does it say how many, like you have to take it by a certain time or?
Let me see if I can pull it up.
I think it's by the 12th.
Okay, cool. Okay, so
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, cool. So yeah, there's definitely some terms I wanted to like also discuss just to be sure that we have. I know we have covered them over the semester, but just to give you like some ideas about the stuff that will be in that assessment. I'm trying to find my email so that I can share that with you. And of course, there's like 1,000,009 emails, so that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to probably do it in a announcement or something to you guys later because we have just an hour today and I do have to leave at 5. So however far we get in the PowerPoint is how far we get. So has anybody in the meeting watched My Boyfriend, the Sex Tourist? Some of you that have taken class with me before have seen it before.
Yes, I saw it, yes.
Okay, yeah. Anybody who did not take a class with me watch it? I'm looking to see like reactions, or you can put it in the chat. Anybody?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay. Well, you're in for a treat, I guess. I don't know. This week we're talking about prostitution, but also drugs, public order crimes. So let me share the screen with you. Let's just get started with the presentation. Okay. So can everyone see? Good to go? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's these learning objectives in here, but public order crimes involve acts that interfere with the operations of society and the ability of people to function efficiently. So it's really interesting how the book just really starts off with this idea that like we have a consensus on what we need as a society to operate and function efficiently, and that we also have shared norms and customs and values. So right away, we can kind of see how that might be problematic. Any ideas why that might be problematic?
People have different beliefs and norms.
Yep, exactly. People have different beliefs. They have different norms. I'm trying to join you through my phone. So I'm looking down. Don't mind me. So that way I can make sure I have things. So it's interesting. A lot of this, these laws that we're going to talk about in these areas that we're going to talk about have a lot to do with morality and the idea that like the things that these public order crimes, they go against our morality as a society. So I had a question that I just wanted to ask all of you. Do you think that there are victimless crimes?
Yes.
Okay, get into it.
Oh, you want me to
give me some examples?
Oh,
yeah.
I think maybe like I mean victimless crimes. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. What were you thinking?
I was thinking, but there are victims. When you say victimless crimes, I was thinking like maybe you know the pornography.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So I'm just thinking of that. I mean the victims. I mean the victims are portrayed within the pornography, but they're not. Say, you know, a lot of the child pornography that's being passed around, it's not for say, you know, 1-to-1, you know,
okay.
Type. I mean, they could be kids from other countries.
Okay,
but
sure.
they are victims. So that's why I was taking that back.
Yeah, child pornography is a little tough, but what about like pornography between consenting adults?
No.
Is that a victimless crime?
No.
Okay, someone's saying no. Thomas, are you saying no?
Yes, so is Tyler too, I think.
Oh, and okay, I can only see so many faces at one time. So if you have... I
was saying it was victimless.
Oh, it is a victimless crime. Okay. Anybody say no?
Well, I say no, you know.
Okay, in a situation where there are consenting adults, why might that not be victimless? Who might be the victim then in a situation like pornography with consenting adults?
Is that question toward me or Tyler?
Or Tyler said it is a victimless crime, but
Okay.
I think, Thomas, you were saying it wasn't.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Thomas, I'm not with you on this one.
I think I could see somewhere.
Anybody want to?
I'm not sure where are we talking about where pornography is like it's against public order. I mean, how I'm failing to understand that.
Pornography, is it a victimless crime? Like, so how this conversation started off was, can you name some victimless crimes?
It's not even a crime. Porn's not a crime.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I mean, it's not legal. They have thousands and thousands of websites for it. Underage porn, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but of age porn, that's not a crime, right?
In our country, no.
Oh, so are you thinking other countries then?
Other countries it is illegal, right? And sorry, go ahead, Ashley. Is that Ashley speaking?
Yeah. I was saying how I actually didn't know that in other countries it's a crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Leanne, you had your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, so I think that in some way, shape, or form, I watched the Life After Pornography Ends documentary, and they talk about how there's a lot of not much consent behind the scenes. They just go in thinking that they're going to do a certain act, and then it ends up being more than that, and then they aren't even paid in the end, so that could eventually become a victim crime.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of see pornography as still being victimless at times, because they also don't know how much money is being made from their porn, and they might not see how much or how many people view it. Mm-hmm. Therefore it can be victimless.
Or they're the victims in that sense that they're being like taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, I've seen that documentary. There's also Hot Girls Wanted. It's on Netflix. If any of you have seen that, and it's, I mean, like insane because, I was going to say prostitution, but pornography exploding with the online industry, and how a lot of women are now getting into it because anybody with a webcam or access to Zoom, don't do this on Zoom, I'm just joking, but access to a webcam can now get involved in pornography. And it's so interesting that, like, you know, a lot of these porn companies that are online, they want more and more outrageous types of porn. And that was one of the things that they talked about in that documentary, that a lot of times these women are being put into like gonzo style porn where like maybe they're not killed at the end, but they're being like hit and forced to do like really degrading things. And so it's interesting that there's like this idea that there's consent there, but then, right, like, you know, they were thinking one thing and then they get there and it's a whole nother thing. Usually when we hear like victimless crimes, I hear a lot of times people say things like drugs, prostitution, downloading content. Yes. Oh my God, Napster. Do you remember Napster, or are you like way too young? That was such a huge thing.
No, I remember Napster, LimeWire.
Yeah. Oh my God, LimeWire. Totally infecting your computer.
In that sense, wouldn't that still have a victim, because the company's now not getting as well? It's not like they really need the money, but the company isn't getting as much money as they normally would have. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, like my roommate uses Popcorn Time, so that like downloads.
Oh, I've never heard of that. Okay, Popcorn Time, and it downloads movies.
Yeah, and like you can easily download movies, and it works pretty well. But one day I did get an email from like the federal government saying this, like, so you know.
Yeah, be careful. Yeah, definitely. So sometimes we do hear that there are these victimless crimes, but who really gets to define, well, because most of the time crime, when it comes to these types of crimes that we're talking about, these public order crimes, they have a base in this idea of morality. And so then we get into this conversation about who gets to define what is moral and what is not moral, right? So, the debate about morality has existed for all of recorded history. The book even mentions, like in the Bible with Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And even now we still have like debates about what is moral and what is acceptable and what is right and what is wrong. Those of you that took SOC 105 with me, we have had a huge discussion about, should drugs be legalized? Is this something that morality should be a part of when it comes to drug usage? So certain crimes are believed to erode the moral fabric of society, and that's why they then get punished and are prohibited. And one of the functions of criminal law is to give an expression to the collective feeling of, like, we don't like that, revulsion towards certain acts. And so that's why the law tends to support these, again, moral issues when it comes to crimes. So, yes, the idea of social harm is another thing beyond just morality. The idea that like an act is causing harm on society is another reason why certain things then become criminalized. And so immoral acts can be distinguished from crimes on the basis of, again, the social harm that they cause. So we might not like something, we might not find it like moral. For example, lying. I think even the book talks about the 7 deadly sins, which are like pride and sloth, laziness, and greed. These things are not punishable by law, yet they're still immoral. So when we're looking at like how the law gets involved in it, this idea of social harm, like it's not just the fact that it's immoral, but it's the fact that it causes harm to others in society. That's where we see criminal law start to come into play. But it's really interesting because, again, harm is super subjective. What somebody might consider harmful. Again, I just mentioned this discussion about pornography. Some people might find it immoral. Some people might find it a true social harm. In fact, later on in the chapter, does pornography lead to violence? There have been a lot of people who've looked at like how pornography leads to interpersonal violence, sexual assault, rape, things of that nature, even just sexual harassment. So, right? Even when we look at something like alcohol, right? It's completely legal, but yet it causes more harm than hard drugs, illicit drugs, than, right? But yet still legal. So it's interesting when we say like, oh, well, it's not just immoral, it's a social harm. Harm, again, is super subjective. People, there are more people who die from alcohol-related deaths. I would say that that's a huge social harm, and yet, again, alcohol is legal. So acts that are believed to be extremely harmful to the public are usually outlawed, and those which harm only the actor are considered like more tolerable. So I'm trying to think of some examples. Anybody can think of can anyone think of an example of something that we kind of tolerate in our society? Like cigarette smoking, a lot of times people say, well, that only harms the person, even though we know about secondhand smoke. But the idea is that like, well, you're the person who's deciding to smoke a cigarette, so it's just going to hurt you, right? Any other examples you can think of?
Well, I think you have some of the marijuana laws.
Okay, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, spoken
because,
like a true Californian.
Well, I'm just saying, there's some states that, outright make it legal.
Yeah.
Or in California, just recently for recreational.
Yep, exactly. And then there are some people doing federal time for the same drug because it's considered socially harmful. So thank you, Thomas. Perfect. We can move forward now. So yeah, who gets
Andy
to just say it again?
Andy had his hand.
I'm sorry, Andy. Sorry. Oh my gosh.
I was just gonna say that we can also say that like binge drinking would be considered because while it is illegal not to drink before you're 21, there's no exact law that says you can't drink too much.
Yes.
Which binge drinking is a lot worse than just having like a beer or something.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. Thank you, Andy and Thomas. Perfect examples. Yeah, it is really interesting that we don't have like regular. Well, we have an alcohol limit, but if you're not driving, you're just knocking them back. Yep. Good points. Okay, so again, who decides, what is moral and what is immoral? I guess I should have not stopped the sharing part. Any ideas? Who gets to decide what is moral and what's not moral? Tyler, yeah.
Our elected legislators.
Okay. Yeah, they're definitely a part of it.
At least here in America.
Okay. Leanne, you said the rich. Yeah, get into it. Yeah, okay. If you want.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I would say that the rich have the biggest influence because you usually see that the rich are the ones that are in powers, aka our president, and you see that they have a large say in what gets passed, what doesn't get passed, what is approved by them, and even though they might have your vote, they don't vote in your best interest, for people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're out to make their own self-gain in a way.
Yeah.
Benefits them, and that's why things like alcohol and tobacco are still so legal and prominent, whereas marijuana doesn't really have any backers in the top rich that can benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for mentioning how the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry, I mean, they have like a buttload of money to keep it legal, right? To support that. I mean, I don't even know if there's any legislation that's looking to like ban alcohol, but I mean, I know that there's been a lot with like cigarettes. We have a lot of like anti-smoking campaigns that have come about, but again, cigarettes are still legal, even though they cause so much health issues to people. Would anybody say like we as a society, we get to decide what is moral and what is not moral?
I think so, to a point, because once again, you can use some of the drugs. I mean, they are now considering, making some of the drug or decriminalizing some of the drugs because they found out that it's not really the fact that the drug should be made illegal. It's not. It's more of a social problem that should be handled through like maybe rehabilitation.
Okay.
And so I think they're either going to make it legal or decriminalize it.
Okay, James. Yep, I see your hand.
I think I agree with Thomas that people do because, like he's saying, marijuana. And I think it's because of like a regional thing. Like we're on the West Coast, we're in California. People are going to have a different say as than people from the South have a lot of different ideals. So I think that the people have a really great influence on their politicians, and that's why they get elected because they follow their views and try to get their things passed. So I would say, yeah, the people do have a pretty good say.
Okay. Yeah, I think that like we're looking at things from like a conflict kind of perspective when we look at like who, the powerful, they're the ones who get to decide, what's legal, what's acceptable. And then we also have, just this same perspective of like, well, we have some influence and we have some say in what we want and what we don't want, especially when it comes to what we support. So our dollars still say a lot about what we feel is right and what is acceptable and things of that nature. But it's also really interesting that I don't think I'm going to be able to get to this slide because it's way down in the chapter. But I hope you read in the book how like pornography is more people are watching pornography or visiting porn sites than going to like CNN or like the news. But most people are now like, I love porn, So it's interesting that like we have these. On one end it's legal, we have the law that supports that, like, yes, you can watch pornography or whatever, but then there's this social aspect of like, it's not cool to just sit around and admit that like, it's Thursday night and we're a little two-faced, like you said, Tyler. Okay, sure. And I think it's just, we have these like informal social controls that like, there's just certain things that are appropriate to say and not appropriate to say. I mean, I guess unless you're a 14-year-old, I was going to say 14-year-old boy, like usually they like to brag to their friends about, the crap they watch. But okay, so let's keep going. But yeah, when it comes to morality, definitely, as we're going to talk about, it's not that we all get to decide, because I think sometimes if we were all to get to decide, we would see a lot of things change. There is some element of power that comes into who gets to have their voice definitely heard and whose voice gets considered and then turned into policy. So, and then are we more interested in punishing differences rather than social harm? And you can definitely argue with that with things like drugs, other nonviolent offenses. We just, are constantly looking at punishing what we feel or what some people feel is immoral rather than whether or not it's harmful. So there's that. Why isn't this moving? Okay. What would you criminalize that is now legal? And then the second question is I just wanted to ask you guys, what would you decriminalize that is now illegal? So you can answer either one of them. Okay, Tyler, yeah.
I would further criminalize abuse of alcohol, and obviously the nation's already starting to do it, but decriminalize marijuana.
Okay, all right. James, yeah.
I don't really know how to put this, but I guess like companies giving money to politicians to make their kind of policies go through, like especially like military contractors and things like that. I mean, not that whatever, but that's a big reason that get some of the policies get.
Yeah,
they have a few rules and regulations for that, but yeah, they do need to be revised and further explained because there's loopholes around them, of course.
Oh yeah, if you look at something like ALEC, those of you that took Social 25 with me before, or maybe just even social problems, ALEC is a, for lack of a better term, constituency of politicians and businesses that work to make legislation for prisons. I mean, they came up with SB 1070 in Arizona. They have written a lot of mandatory minimum sentencing laws, and I mean, they've introduced legislation to have private industries involved in prison, and obviously you're going to have a vested interest in prisons being around, and you're going to make laws to maintain those prisons if you're profiting from it. So I hear what you're saying, James. Things like that it seems like we should have some separation between our politicians and businesses. Anybody else, anything that you would either decriminalize that is now legal or legalize that is now illegal?
I would, and I know I'm maybe getting too further into the chapter though, but I would actually legalize prostitution.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think we mentioned this before in your class before when we saw that movie about my boyfriend's sex.
Tourist.
Yeah, you asked us that though, because I think if you would probably legalize it and regulate it, you may get away from a lot of the stuff that's being illegal, and then the people that are out there doing it, they may go to a maybe replicable type of a business, to enjoy.
Okay, yeah.
And then you may cut down on a lot of diseases, a lot of the crime that happens that that's associated with prostitution.
Okay, yeah.
Through regulation and mitigation, you could mitigate the diseases and assault, violence that go hand in hand with it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have that question in the PowerPoint a little bit later. So the idea is that it's a profession that's been around forever. Is it something that's going to go away? Probably not. I mean, people are not, the law is not deterring anybody. So is it really that necessary? Jenny, you said you agreed with Thomas. So cool. Anybody else want to just one last one before we move forward? Anything? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to move on. Okay, so it's interesting when we're looking at, and I was asking the question about who gets to decide, what is moral and what is not. There's this term by Howard Becker, moral entrepreneurs. The book mentions him, but they also talk about moral crusaders and moral crusades. Becker's just really famous for moral entrepreneurs. He actually talks about folk devils and moral entrepreneurs, and he looks at how the media plays a role in this. But just really quickly, moral crusaders are people who operate with an absolute certainty that their way or belief is right and that any means are justified to get their way. The book even talks about moral vigilantes, people who just go above the law to enforce their beliefs. I was thinking of the Westboro Baptist Church. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them, and I almost put a picture of their protest signs, but it was just so hideous, and I didn't know how. It's a Tuesday. It's just too early for that kind of hatred. But if you don't know who the Westboro Baptist Church is, they protest, soldiers' funerals. They hate gay people. They're just a really hateful sect of folks. So there's that. And the popular targets of moral crusaders are places like abortion clinics, abortion doctors, pornographers, gun dealers, environmental issues. I'm pretty sure maybe some of you have seen those like protests where I just recently saw like Kelly Rowland. She got protested, I think, by like some members of PETA where they were like, oh, we want to take a picture. And then all of a sudden they started shouting like, you have blood on your hands. So there's that. And then moral entrepreneurs, the definition is the interest groups that attempt to control social life and the legal order in such a way as to promote their own personal set of moral values. And these are people who use their influence to shape the legal process in the way that they see fit. And so moral crusaders are definitely, people like, there was a chat comment. Let me go to it. Sorry. Leanne, you talked about Mike Huckabee. And then that he recently tried to attack our school for being immoral. Do you want to share that? Leanna, are you still there? Okay.
Okay, so yeah, it's extremely uncomfortable for me, but I just thought it was funny that we're talking about moral entrepreneurs when I will completely out myself. Our school was actually criticized for an event that the Pride Center was putting on. I'll say it was my idea to run an event. I freaked out a little bit because Mike Huckabee actually set off a kind of like little anger bandwagon because I wanted to talk about a community in the BDSM culture. And because it made a little bit of online news that he went full out, like, this is immoral. I can't believe Cal State San Marcos is putting this on.
Wow.
And that it's animal-based fetishes. And I think it was because of the title kind of set him off, but he took it down. And so to me, it's kind of funny because we have these individuals that are like moral entrepreneurs and set off this big debate, and watching this unfold was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Do you mind telling us what, like, if you don't want to, well, thank you for sharing, one. And then two, if you don't want to divulge anymore, you don't have to. But when you said animal-based, the only thing I thought about was like furries. Like,
that's what I was talking about. Versus pet play. And we were going to be protested. We were going to have the news, and come to find out none of them showed up.
Oh, okay.
And, I wanted to talk about why these two groups are not connected to what people usually define them as, and that's like bestiality, that they just want to screw each other in fursuits, which none of them do because it's $5,000 easily for a fursuit. Yeah. No one wants to be doing anything in that. And so having people come from like different sections of the community to talk about it, it wasn't like a big old lecture like they were saying, but the fact that Huckabee saw one article that was completely just not true and then just blew it up into big proportions. So
yeah, that is so fascinating, and thank you for like sharing that, because I used to teach human sexuality, and it's interesting, like when it comes to fetishes and people feel like, oh, certain things are not cool or immoral. I know I've talked about furries, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be sexual, like you're mentioning, or people with real dolls. I mean, there's a documentary called Guys and Dolls, and people have serious issues with that. So it's kind of interesting, but I was trying to think of some other examples of moral entrepreneurs. I think the book talks extensively about DOMA and our recent Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. And then I thought about Kim Davis, who refused to allow a same-sex couple to file their marriage certificate. And she was like championed as this hero by like Mike Huckabee and other people that like, oh, good for you, because this goes against your moral beliefs, and so you should uphold your moral beliefs over the law. Crazy. I mean, it was interesting because, I mean, the law is the law, and yeah. But again, I think that she was just the example that came to my mind when it came to moral entrepreneurs. And you have someone like Mike Huckabee, who is a politician who does have power to introduce legislation and vote on legislation. And so, yes, James.
One person that comes to mind is Betsy DeVoe that I got, like the education lady, and it's just kind of spooky because like what could happen to the education system and like her kids later, and like what kind damage she could bring, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh God, we don't even have time. But yes, Betsy DeVos and her. I don't even. I feel like, you know, she's one of those people that like was put in a position, and it's clear that she's not up on what happens in education. I mean, there were a lot of questions that were asked of her that she really struggled with. I think as far as morality is concerned, you know, she's really for a lot of things that, I mean, some people support her, but I was going to say, I mean, the most moral argument I've heard from her is about guns, and she really is for guns in schools and things of that nature. So, yeah, good example. Yeah, so these moral entrepreneurs, these are people, again, it's a little bit different than like a moral crusader, somebody who's like, you know, fighting and protesting for rights is different than somebody who has the ability to use their voice to influence the legal process. So, different. So when the book starts to transition into sexually related offenses, and the three most common ones are paraphilias, prostitution, and pornography. And so under paraphilias, the most common one that we tend to look at is pedophilia. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who wants to legalize pedophilia. I think it's one of those areas that when we look at like our common values and things of that nature, most people, nearly all people would say like we have an issue with somebody having sex with a underage person. Where it gets a little kind of socially constructed is when we talk about age and what age is considered underage and the idea of consent, right? I see a chat. Hold on. Oh yeah, okay, Tyler, you mentioned like priests being involved with like young boys, and the chapter definitely discusses that. Totally. Again, there's another documentary that I used to show, or it was like a special about the age of consent and how, you know, there have been some 18-year-old high school seniors who are involved with statutory rape cases because their girlfriend is like 14. She's like a freshman in high school and they're like a senior. And so, and then different states have different age limits for consent. Some are 18, some are 16, some are, right? So it's interesting. James, yes.
I actually wasn't. I was a senior. I was 18. I just graduated. And my girlfriend was 17. I was like, man, I can't break up with her until she turns 18 because I feel like if something happens, she could like tell on me.
Oh,
well,
my
like,
goodness.
it's difference, but I was like freaking out because, you know, it's just one of those things you got to think about as a boy.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how people's lives have been shaped by this. Hold on one second. I'm just getting my charger. So, yeah, pedophilia, something we're not really like, you know, good with. Anybody know what frauderism is? Has anyone ever heard that term? Okay, I don't know where my charger's at. Has anyone ever heard of that term before?
I have, but I just can't think of what it is right now.
It's like touching somebody in public without their consent. I mean, that's why I have that picture down there at the bottom. Voyeurism. What's that?
Just when you're like watching, right?
Yeah. Exhibitionism.
Showing yourself off.
Showing, yep. And then sadomasochism.
Dom and receiving pain, you know, take joy in, I guess. It has to do with inflicting pain.
Like Hellraiser?
Yeah, giving or receiving pain, right? So, yeah, it's interesting that, like, again, these sexual practices, you tend to not be the norm. And then there are different responses to each of them. Obviously, pedophilia is illegal. Frauderism is illegal. Voyeurism and exhibitionism both have there are different laws behind that as well. But then something like sadomasochism, not illegal, right? And it's interesting. Oh, Trace, you went off mute. You want to talk about it?
No, sorry. I was just saying I thought it sounded like it should be.
Say it again.
I thought you made it sound like it should be. I mean,
Oh, sadomasochism?
yes, it's pretty much just bedroom play.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's this article. I don't know if any of you took the sociology of deviance with me, but I give this article about the BDSM community and how there are masochists who are being harmed not to their liking. I'm trying to figure out like the way to explain this. They're being harmed not to their liking, but they continue to allow someone to harm them to be a part of the BDSM community. Kind of interesting. It's like a consensual unwanted harm, much like how we talk about consensual unwanted sex. That is very much a thing. This is like consensual unwanted harm. So it's kind of interesting. Again, the idea of morality behind it. If somebody gives consent to be humiliated, is that their business? Should there be laws around it? Should there not? It's interesting. Even something like exhibitionism, right? You look at like there are beaches, public beaches that are not public, but beaches that allow nudity, right? That are still public, but private in a sense that Okay, I see some other ones. Leanne, I think you were talking about the BDSM community. You said it's because there are limits, trust and communication within the BDSM community. Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that was really interesting about that article was we had a discussion about how 50 Shades of Grey is really like the worst example of, what the BDSM community is about, and that people watch that movie and then they go home and inflict a lot of harm on each other, and it's not, pleasurable or anything that anybody would want. And so definitely. There was another chat that came in, but I can't see it anymore. So yeah, definitely. There are, much like any other activity, you have to learn how to be a part of that community. And I think that a lot of times that's not something that's usually discussed. People just feel like, I'm just going to hate you. No, don't do that. Don't do it. Yeah, Leanne's saying, don't do it. Yes. Okay. So yeah, paraphilias, right? The ones that we're definitely most concerned about are ones that involved underage people, unconsenting people. Prostitution is another sexual crime that causes or gets a lot of attention and has a lot of concern. So the definition of prostitution today is granting non-marital sexual access established by the mutual agreement of the prostitute, the client, and the employer for remuneration. How do we feel about that? Would anybody include anything, exclude anything?
Well, is the employer considered like the pimp? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Mutual agreement. Like, do they always want to do it, or is it the pimp telling them to do it? That seems like a.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. And Leanne said the same thing. It might not be mutual. And Jenny, you said not so sure about the agreement of the prostitute. So it's really interesting that if you're under duress or something, oops, sorry. Oh my God, which way are we going? This way. If you're under duress, it's interesting that is that prostitution, or is that something else? And then usually we're talking about this in another class of mine. If this is being done without that consent, then it's sex trafficking, right? Which is a whole nother crime in and of itself.
Human trafficking, yeah.
Yeah, human trafficking. Yep, exactly, Jenny. Yep, you're right. It was interesting. Prostitutes are referred to by sociologists as street-level sex workers whose activities are similar to other activities that go on in a service industry. So, there's an exchange of goods, there's an economic basis behind it, and there's no emotional attachment. And so prostitution can be seen as like a service industry in the way that like Walmart, you go to Walmart, it's not like you go in and have an emotional attachment to a bottle of water and then you know, like have a whole conversation with the person checking you out. No, it's an exchange of goods. There's an economic basis behind it, and then it's no emotional attachment. So, but it's really interesting how gendered prostitution is, and I'm pretty sure all of you know this. I mean, you're all adults, and if you've ever heard about prostitution, then you know that like most of the people arrested for prostitution are women. I mean, the gender ratio is 2 to 1, female to male, and it's rare that Johns are ever prosecuted. So when we look at like prostitution in other cultures, like it's interesting that like in our country, we have areas of the country, and actually it's only really one. It's in Nevada, and it's not Las Vegas. It's outside of Las Vegas, where you can engage in legalized prostitution. But if you look at other countries, they have a variety of different oh my God, legalities behind it. Like Germany, it's legal. In fact, did you read that they give like a discount to senior citizens for prostitution? So, you know, it's yeah.
Excited to get old.
Hey, apparently they're great customers. I don't know. But yeah, so there is, I mean, it's taxed. They have to pay taxes. They have to be registered with the with whatever state they're in. It's the same thing in Nevada. They do the same thing where you have to be registered with the state as a sex worker before you can just. Then you're a part of a brothel. They pay, you know, to rent out a space, and then the person who rents out the space to them pays additional taxes, and it's a legal industry. I was going to say I like the documentary. It's not that I like it, but I like it as an example of something that hardly ever gets talked about, and that's sex tourism and the sex tourism industry. And I think whenever anything I've ever seen on American legalized prostitution has a very, I was going to say, I can't think of a word other than like, dramatized kind of portrayal. It's not very, it really centers around Dennis Hoff. He's a very famous brothel owner out in Nevada, and a lot of the programs and documentaries I've seen about it, they all focus on him and his success, and I really don't feel like it's a really great portrayal of what legalized prostitution looks like. Because again, these women are not, it's just not done right. So I think My Boyfriend the Sex Tourist gives a very different look at like what legalized prostitution would really look like if, you know, in a variety of different ways. And it's not always this glamorous, like, you know, the way that it's portrayed in things I've seen here in America. And then the other things I've seen always have to do with, when it comes to prostitution, either Dennis Hoff in Nevada or street prostitution that's illegal. So it was really fascinating that even within prostitution, there's like categories. Streetwalkers. What are streetwalkers?
Those are the ones that you see walking up and down El Cajon Boulevard.
Yeah, yes, on the street, definitely.
Yes. That's pretty specific, Thomas.
We're gonna say Thomas knows because of his police work, right? He's been out in the streets before and he's seen things, right?
Yeah, I've seen them though, but you know, and I've seen them out here in the Oceanside, North County area. Mm-hmm. They've cleaned up a lot since. I mean, I came in the early '80s, 1980. And Hill Street, Coast Highway in Oceanside, they used to be cluttered with them. You know, in the evenings, on the weekends, you see them.
Yeah.
And sometimes early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Military bases are a hot spot for them.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Bar girls. What are bar girls?
Those are the ones that, you know, you can actually pay it. I'm not sure how they're done here, but I know overseas, you pay the fine to the owner, and then they're yours for whatever, for the night, a few hours, maybe for a whole day.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, these are women that work in bars, obviously, to solicit clients. Brothel prostitutes, that's what you see in My Boyfriend the Sex Tourist. That's also what you can see out in Nevada. Call girls, And what's really interesting is, when we look at like how prostitution and arrests are on the decline, it's not that prostitution is on the decline, but that people are going to the internet to do their prostituting. I mean, Craigslist and what's the other site?
Backpage.
Backpage, yes, right, and that people are going on these sites to prostitute. And that now it's considered, it was so interesting that it's considered low risk now. Whereas before, I mean, obviously with streetwalkers, there's a high level of risk. And any prostitution, it's a very dangerous occupation, and it's very dangerous work. But that when they say low risk in getting caught. And that like there's been so much change and kind of technological innovation when it comes to prostitution that there's a lot of people who are engaging in it without feeling the risk of being caught. Escort services and call houses are kind of similar to the idea of brothel prostitution. This is where somebody has like a madam or somebody who books them. Heidi Fleiss was a really famous person who ran an escort service / prostitution ring. Circuit travelers, this is women who or prostitutes who, go amongst certain areas or certain cycles. I was thinking about, the book talks about like migrant areas, but there's also this YouTube, you can YouTube it, Vice did a special about women who prostitute at truck stops and how they like travel about in different areas for truck stop drivers. Skeezers. Oh my God, I have not heard that term since like 92, but it's interesting. Anybody know what skeezers are? These are women who prostitute for drugs. That like usually they tend to exchange goods for drugs. And then massage parlors, usually there's not like full contact sex that happens, like full intercourse, but like oral sex or hand jobs. Right. I think manual manipulation is the fancy word for it. Who becomes a prostitute? It's more common for male and female street-level sex workers to come from troubled homes marked by extreme conflict and hostility. They're usually pretty young. They usually have experienced sexual trauma at a very young age. They have histories of substance abuse, health problems, PTSD, social stigmatization, isolation. They have very little family support, limited educational backgrounds. Most don't complete high school. And the reasons for doing it too, economic need. It's very rare that you're going to find someone working in the prostitution industry because they like sex. It's usually due to, I need money, right? So it's interesting when it comes to kind of controlling prostitution. Today, prostitution is considered a misdemeanor. It's usually punishable by a fine or a really short jail sentence, like a couple of days or so. And it's really interesting that Johns are rarely arrested. Although, did you read about John schools? Did you read about that in the book?
What's a John school?
So it's this program, like, for example, in San Francisco, they have what's called the John School. So, like, if you are a man, that's usually who solicits prostitutes, who buys them or pays for prostitution. If they are arrested, they can go to this John School for like a day, and it teaches them about the dangers of prostitution, the health risks. Basically like it's to deter them from continuing to engage in prostitution, in buying, on the buying end. So interesting. We kind of talked about should prostitution be legalized? I know, Thomas, you said yes. Is there anybody who says no? No one? I'm okay.
I mean, it's not. I was kind of like laughing, but it's really not funny though. But I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, in a lot of different categories that you have out here, and a lot of these are dangerous. Mm-hmm. If it was put legalized, I think it would cut down on a lot of the crime associated with it.
Okay, James, I see your hand.
I would say that we should legalize it because already prostitution is really stigmatized. People don't like it, like don't like to hear about it or anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like they may not want to seek out help if something's wrong with them, like maybe an STD or any kind of help they can get. With it being legalized, I feel like they would have more options to go to places that would help them with whatever they need, and also kind of talk to them, like, because you said they come from like these horrible backgrounds. They could find more help, and like, you know, I just think, and they may not even do it anymore from with the help they're getting and stuff. I don't know. A lot of good things can come of it, and a lot of different things. I don't know.
Yeah. What might be? Oh, go ahead.
If I was just gonna say, like, if it becomes legal, I think maybe it might get rid of the whole pimp scene as well. If it's allowed to be legal, they might not feel the need to have someone above them taking care of them and protecting them.
Okay.
Because they don't need to hide from like the law, and I don't know, kind of in that sense.
Yeah. That's been an argument that's been made about it, that they wouldn't. They would put pimps out of business and the violence that's associated with having a pimp. What are some consequences, though? Yeah, James.
I feel like that now that men, I mean, I know both males and females do it, but I feel like males now know that it's legal will kind of risk their marriages in a sense and going after, because they won't get in trouble anymore. I mean, and I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the thought. Like, it's kind of interesting. Okay, I thought a comment came in. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, people who want to cheat are probably going to cheat, legal or not. So it's like smoking crack. Like, if crack was legal, would anybody be like, oh, well, now that it's legal,
true,
let me light up? You know what I mean?
Right,
for some people, it might not ever be an option for them. I think in some ways, one thing that usually doesn't get discussed is where are we going to house these brothels? I mean, right now, the reason why, you know, Nevada and the prostitution brothels are kind of legal there is because it's in Pahrump County, like in the middle of nowhere where nobody's at. Would you want to have a brothel in your neighborhood?
I think, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Well, like in terms of like legalizing prostitution and stuff, like you're talking about the consequences, I think that if we, like a consequence that could happen is if we legalize prostitution, that I think it would make it a little bit easier for human trafficking to happen, just because it's legalized now, so people can use the excuse, oh, well, it's legal, you know, while they're trying to hide the fact that they're actually, you know, setting up someone against their will, like to do that activities or whatever. I guess it could open up something like that. I mean, not saying it will, I'm just saying be a consequence.
Or it could open the venue for women that take part in it to actually coordinate and work with police, because they don't have to fear for their illegal acts.
Okay, true, it could. Leanne, you said we haven't given opportunity to talk about sex, let alone prostitution. Education needs to happen first before we embrace prostitution. I think, yeah, that's definitely a very valid point. I think, Andy, you talked about something that it was interesting, because when I was here for graduate school, that was on the ballot in San Francisco to legalize prostitution. It didn't pass, but we got into this conversation, and the idea that, like, we already have industries now where people are being forced to work against their will, labor trafficking, and you would never know. You're looking at these women, they're doing these jobs, and you think they want to do them, but they don't. And could prostitution then be that avenue of, a lot of times it's women who are coming from other countries, and they're told, oh, you're going to come and work this job. And then they get there and they're like, what? So could there be this thing of intimidation that's happening outside of the law? How would you be able to regulate for that? How would you be able to know? And it's not like these women could be like, okay, I'm signing up against my will. They don't speak the language, they whatever. And then now all of a sudden they're involved in something legal that's actually illegal and problematic. So I hear what you're saying on that. So yeah, there's pros and cons to this. It is kind of interesting that, you know, it could help to mitigate a lot of problems. Like you mentioned, Tyler, that women would not feel stigmatized and like they couldn't go to the police for help. On the same end, it's like, it sounds good until the logistics of it come out. Like, where are people going to be at? I mean, I know the red light district in Amsterdam, right, is pretty famous because it's that spot? Would we be having places like that? Or would it be like, you know, you can set up shop wherever you want? I think the other thing too, like you mentioned about sex, the idea that like just because you're engaged in prostitution, there's a lot of rape and sexual assault that happens that a lot of people don't talk about because they assume you're a prostitute, so you want to have sex with everybody who comes across your path, but that's not true. You can be a prostitute and be raped. And so there's still a lot of like stuff to get through it. But I think a lot of the times it's one of those crimes that definitely or activities that definitely has a very heavy moral attachment to it, that people have like some, you know, this moral feeling about whether it should be legalized or not. And so there's that. But I appreciate that we kind of got into it without the moral aspect, because some people just feel like it's wrong, right? I think there's a couple more things. Oh, there's a chat. Tyler, you said legalize it and tax it instead of raising the gas tax. Okay. I mean, yeah, I think everybody is super in favor of legalizing a lot of things. Leanne said you approve. Legalizing a lot of things for tax benefits. We have 2 minutes. I just wanted to make one really interesting point. Like the same thing is kind of happening with weed. I know a lot of people are like, yes, legalize it and tax it, and it's so great. It's so interesting when it comes to the weed industry. Didn't you watch the piece about like how it's really not benefiting people who've been locked up before for drug felonies, and that it's like the wealthy are getting extremely rich on legalized? So it's like we have this cycle of social problems. Like you deal with one and it creates a whole nother issue. Just recently in Oakland, though, they have passed an affirmative action policy that if you were arrested for a drug crime and you lived in Oakland, you can be a part of the legalized marijuana industry, even though you have a felony. So the Bay Area is just a progressive, crazy place, right? I mean, we've got like free school at San Francisco State. So just interesting stuff. But yeah, so that's just an introduction to these like moral public order crimes. The rest of the chapter talks about pornography, and I can't remember the last one, but you can look at the PowerPoint. I will put it up there. Please be sure to watch My Boyfriend the Sex Tourist, because that's what you have to write your thing on. Okay, I'm going to take attendance because I haven't done it yet, and I know some of you have to run, so I'm going to try to do it really fast. And if you have questions, write them in the chat and I'll answer them. Okay, Andy, and if you hear your name and you're here, you can head out. Ashley, your last name starts with an S, right?
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie.
And then real quick, Professor.
Wait, unless there's 2 Ashleys.
Is this, okay, Ashley McKenzie, is there another Ashley? And yes, Tyler, I saw that today and I wanted to cry that 102,000 is low income.
Or the Twitter representative who makes 160,000 in Frisco a year and barely scrapes by.
Yep.
But that wasn't what I was going to ask. Because I know last week we didn't have to do the discussion at all for attending this.
Yes.
The same thing, no discussion period?
No. You have to do, the reason you didn't do discussion last week is because we did that mock trial situation. So yeah, this week watch the documentary and I asked you a couple of questions about it.
Okay, so initial response, not respond to peers?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.